I'm Christopher Nottingham.
And I'm Victor Polino.
And you're listening to Civil Dissonance,
a show where we explore, engage, and dissect the topics that divide us as a society. Today on Civil Dissonance, we'll be discussing
conservatism in America. Hey, Victor.
Yes, Chris.
So today we'll be discussing conservatism in America.
Interesting.
So, with conservatism on the mind, what are the kind of impressions that you get about conservatives? You know, we all know conservatives. We've all talked to conservatives. We've listened to conservatives on the television, on the radio. What kind of impressions do you get from them?
Well, I mean, I think you're getting kind of a narrow perspective if you're just looking through the window of what you see on television or hear on the radio. Thinking about how our episode with Frankie Clogston, and she talked about, the echo chambers.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about that perspective, you have an idea that people who are conservative are usually or religious, and they try to put that into government, that they don't really care about the world around them, about how people's welfare is, if you will. And I think that's maybe a narrow perspective to say,
And that's the impression you're getting from the news.
And I think that's kind of the impression you get from the news. I mean, obviously, when I think you watch the news, you don't get any impression of them because you of conservatism, because they spend more time slamming liberalism.
Yeah. And the other way around too.
Yeah. And I mean, it's across the board.
Yeah. When you hear liberals on television, they're usually slamming conservatives, but that's what the news wants us to see, because that's what gets ratings.
Yeah. But it builds polarization.
It does.
And I don't think it's really given a fair perspective of what conservatism is.
No. I think it would be more beneficial if there were conversations on news networks and on the radio where you had a conservative and a liberal who were having a discussion where things that were said moved the conversation forward, as opposed to, back and forth demeaning comments.
Yeah. I think at the heart of conservatism, and I think I said this in the last episode, was, idea of a smaller government and people being more self-determined. And I think that gets drowned out and maybe vilified.
Yeah, I believe that. Especially if you're listening to a liberal news network, it would definitely be vilified.
Yeah. And I mean, those core principles, as we learned in our liberalism episode, where they sort of see government can more interfere with your life. And so they kind of feel like they should keep it small.
Yeah. In the classical liberalism sense.
Yes. And conservatives still believe that today.
Yeah. Small government, fiscal responsibility, a strong military. I think these are all core principles of conservatism, and also classical liberalism.
Yeah. But it's interesting because you got to wonder, do we see those things through the media as, if you change some of the words out, right? So strong military, warmongering, if you look through the eyes of a liberal biased media.
Okay. That being said, going back to what Dr. Alterman said, we should not let our enemies define us. And I fully and wholeheartedly believe that we shouldn't look at the media as somebody to explain to us the ideals. That should be something that we do on our own.
Yeah, we should search for the balance. We should search for the contrast, I think.
Yeah, and just kind of fully understand what it is that a group believes based on research, into their mindsets and their ideals, instead of developing those opinions based on what we see in the media.
Media is the start of educating yourself, but it's not the end all. That's kind of the way I would see it.
Yeah.
And so, because we have so much bias in the media, I think that is the truth that we need to explore.
Yeah. And that being said, Victor, I think maybe we should have somebody explain to us what it means to be a conservative in the United States. What is conservatism in the U.S.?
Are you talking about a guest again?
I am talking about a guest, Victor.
All right, I think it's my turn this time.
It is your turn.
On today's episode of Civil Dissonance, we're speaking with author Allison Lee Pillinger Choi. Mrs. Choi studied economics at Harvard University and has worked as an analyst for Goldman Sachs. She's also appeared in several media outlets, including Bold TV and On Salon, where she discusses conservative principles, and her book, Bleeding Heart Conservatives, Why It's Good to Be Right. Hi, Allie. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks, guys. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. So can you tell our listeners, other than what I mentioned, a little about yourself?
Sure. I was born and raised in South Florida. I am the daughter of a Korean mother and a Jewish father. And my mom was born in Seoul, South Korea. She came to the U.S. to live the American dream, live in a society where men and women were viewed as equals. My father was born in Brooklyn, New York. He served in the United States Navy and was an airline pilot turned charter school teacher upon retirement. So they instilled lots of good values in me that I now am passing on to my two children. My daughter is 4. My son is almost 2. And when I'm not raising them full time, my extracurriculars include volunteering at the Women's National Republican Club on various committees. I am also a member of the Manhattan Institute. I also spend time working with my alma mater at Harvard University with some of their initiatives back on campus, one of them being trying to bring back viewpoint diversity onto campus, and do some work with the New York Presbyterian Hospital, New York Cares, and some other great organizations in New York City where I live now.
Awesome. Well, with that in mind, can you tell us a little bit about what conservatism is?
Yeah, absolutely. I view conservatism as a value system, a political ideology, whatever you want to call it, but just something that values limited government, freedom, independence, equality of opportunities, equality for all, favoritism to none, fiscal responsibility. These are all sort of phrases that get thrown around when you're talking to a conservative or if you're just hearing political talk in general. But if you think about these values as they apply to everyday life and how you conduct your own lifestyle and how you would like to see your society run, it makes sense when applied to policy situations. Also, conservatives, I think, prioritize how they support and fund the military differently than other political counterparts might. Also valuing the constitutional interpretations of laws and amendments is something that is unique to conservatives. It's a laundry list, but I think those are the few things that jump out at me just in broad strokes.
So can you tell us a little about the history of conservatism in America?
Yeah, so I'll use conservatism and the Republican Party interchangeably, just for the sake of conversation. But the history of the Republican Party is something that really resonates and I'm really proud of. You know, Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican president. And so the party of Lincoln is the party of the abolitionists, the party of the suffragettes, the party of Frederick Douglass. So there are many, my favorite modern day president, Ronald Reagan, his party. So I think that the history of the Republican Party, i.e. conservatism, is something that is rich in values and in culture, and it's something that gets overlooked in today's barrage of headlines and tweets and tribalism of politics. But it's something that definitely its core value is equality of opportunity, equality to all, favoritism to none, and really trying to harness the individual human spirit. So really trying to empower the individual citizen to be self-empowered, resilient, accountable for their own life, their own dreams. That said, there is a place in conservatism for a safety net. That is something that often gets spun and to the disfavor of when one wants to shed conservatism in an unfavorable light. But it is something that conservatism does value a robust civic society where at the local level, the community really supports its fellow citizen.
Can you elaborate on the safety net that you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that part of being a conservative and valuing fiscal responsibility is that when you want to provide a safety net, a fallback for when your fellow American has fallen on hard times or is, in the case of, let's say, an able-bodied, able-minded person is just down on their luck, there is a safety net for to help them get back on their feet. And that said, and conservatism in general believe that it's more beneficial to help the people who need it most, so as a narrower swath of people who truly need assistance versus spreading the support more thinly. So i.e. the financial aid or assistance, whether it come in food stamps or welfare or whatever the case may be, spreading that more thinly is not as beneficial to help an individual get back on their feet than really dedicating a substantive amount of assistance to someone to help them become self-reliant.
Would you consider the government's involvement in that larger or smaller than say private assistance in doing that job?
I guess it would just have to depend on the community or the state. This is why, conservatives also value the local government and states' rights, because every geography, every state, every community has a different set of circumstances. So if there is a true and sincere need for more support, then because of, let's say it's a smaller population or whatever the nuanced case may be, then the government should be of more assistance if it's necessary. But if it's not, and the community is robust enough to help each other through private assistance, through a religious organization, a church, synagogue, what have you, then that would be the optimal road, but it's not the only road to assistance.
Do you believe our founders would have been considered conservatives?
That's an interesting question, just because of the different times that we live in and how the meanings of words shift. Conservatives really value the Constitution, and the founders were the drafters of the Constitution. Not to say that liberals don't, but it just seems that it comes up more in discussions among conservatives. But the fact that perhaps one could make the argument that the founders owned slaves, and that would not be a conservative act, because again, we believe that all men are created equal and women are created equal, and freedom of opportunity and equality. So from that sense, no, but this is just for the sake of discussion and being thought provoking. But the times were different then, and you can't discredit that. So I could also argue that they probably did lean right of center in, as we define that today, in that they really believed in a limited government. They wanted to create a better nation that was different from where they came from, where the individual was in charge of their destiny and their lifestyle and how they wanted to live their life. So from that sense, net, I'd say they're conservative.
So how does conservatism differ from liberalism?
Well, you certainly don't need me to hear all the differences between the two sides these days. But I will say that there's a lot of overlap. I do think, though, the main difference would be how we view the government's role in an individual's life. I think that conservatives seem to have more faith in the individual spirit and his or her ability to thrive under a free enterprise type of society. I also think that meritocracy plays a bigger role in conservatism, where it's, if we're just going to talk about kind of economic ideology, certainly liberals would favor liberals. There's a demographic of liberals, or the Democratic Party, that favors socialism. This is something that you will not find a conservative that favors socialism. So I think that maybe that would just, we'll leave it at that, like a defining kind of divide that's not in a criticizing way, but is factual, that we believe that every person should be able to pursue his or her happiness through whatever career or job type or activity, and that has its, in terms of, let's say, wages or salary, that's going to be measured accordingly. And that kind of plays into the whole meritocracy theme, that's a difference between liberal ideology and conservative ideology.
Can you elaborate a little more on what a meritocracy is?
Meritocracy is just that you are responsible for your achievements and you earn your keep, and you get to, reap what you sow, basically. Does that make better sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
So sometimes I think conservatism is used in a negative connotation. What do you think that is?
I think that, it's been a long time. It's not just since Trump came into office that conservatives have been shed in an unfavorable light. Since I was in college, roughly 12 years ago now, it was something that I felt I had to suppress while I was a student, because I did not want to risk my social life or grades, if I had a liberal professor, because it was just seen as conservatism is like the new communism during the McCarthy era. It was just a bad thing. So I think that it's in part because of things. For instance, our conservative stance on affirmative action is where, drawing back to my point of meritocracy, and equal opportunity, equality for all, and favoritism to none. We think that no individual should have an advantage over another because of the color of their skin or their gender or whatever other demographic you'd want to describe or categorize an individual. We think that every individual is worthy of his or her own being an entity, and to just lump people into classes of race, religion, ethnicity, gender, and then kind of having that be having a positive or negative effect on, let's say, college admissions, is a negative. We shouldn't favor anyone based on anything other than what they as an individual can bring to the table. So that said, I understand that there are reasons for when affirmative action first came to being, that there are reasons for that, and they were sincere and just, but there are unintended consequences to having protocols such as that. And when a conservative says, I don't think that affirmative action policies are the most beneficial paths for bringing racial equality, it's viewed as a racist remark, which it's really not. There's plenty of well-intentioned, thought-provoking leaders in the conservative community, Black, white, Asian, like myself, who make the case for why it doesn't come from a bad place. We're trying to help all Americans, regardless of skin color. But I think that issues like that have been spun and then shed conservatives in this negative light that we're, for instance, racist. The other, negative stereotype I've heard is that we're warmongers. And that we like to pursue military adventurism just because that's what America does to countries it wants to bully. I don't think that that's correct or accurate, and certainly not, it's a mischaracterization of the intent of how we want to use the military, and our brave men and women in uniform. I can say from just on a personal note, my mom, who is from South Korea, she is from South Korea because my grandparents, her parents, fled North Korea. And had the American military not come to the Korean Peninsula and stop North Korea from essentially taking over the entire peninsula, I would not be here today. So that's a case where I think that's why I especially value what our military does and the purpose of their serving our country. And so I think that's another aspect of how conservatism has been spun to have a negative stereotype. That whole warmonger thing really gets to me.
Actually, you mentioned the president earlier. Do you think that the president represents conservative values?
I think in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. So he, for better or for worse, is not an ideologue. He's kind of just Trump. and he certainly represents conservative values versus what Hillary Clinton had to offer. So, these decisions at least in this last presidential election of who to vote for, it's not these decisions aren't made in a vacuum. You have to choose. Someone's going to become president, and so for some people it was the lesser of two evils. For some people it was someone who's going to break the mold of sorry to use this cliche term now, the DC swamp, or everyone had their reasons. But I do think that Trump is, interesting to say this, but is working better with the Republican controlled Congress than a Hillary Clinton presidency would have. So you can't have it all, so we'll take what we can get as within reason. Certainly, I'm not a diehard dogmatic Republican Party member. I'm just a everyday mainstream moderate conservative who is a member of the Republican Party and who just wants to see the best values of the group that I'm affiliated with help to make all Americans pursue life, liberty, and in pursuit of happiness and thrive and prosper how they want and how they want to live their lives.
I know, sometimes, like I was saying, conservatives sometimes get a negative connotation to the name. What do you think is the best way to fix that mindset in the eyes of the opposition?
I think certainly just sitting down and talking with a conservative or just talking with someone who is on the other side politically from you. Talk about whatever. It doesn't have to be politics. Just talk about anything. And you'll realize that they're just another person like you who has the same hopes and dreams and fears and, more or less the interests. And once you can humanize that person, it is not as easy to demonize them when you realize, oh, wait, we disagree on things. Disagreement is just a form of diversity. Demonizing is just mean and doesn't is not productive for a civic society, which in our democratic republic was made to bring together varying viewpoints to come up with an optimal solution for an optimal way forward, by way of legislation, laws and policies. And so just to realize that someone who has different political views from you is not your enemy. It's just another person with a different perspective would be a good start to humanizing conservatives. Also kind of zoning out from just your media bubble, whatever types of media you read, watch, listen to, try to do the opposite, which, clearly if your listeners right now are doing just that. So I don't need to preach to the choir there.
Yeah, we've done a few episodes where we talk about how there's sort of this closed window perspective that we're kind of stuck in these bubbles. Do you think the media slant keeps the liberals and the conservatives separate?
Yeah, and I mean, I do think that while there are a lot of assertions made that there is left media and right media, we know that there's, in terms of the cable networks, there's Fox News, and then there are these very niche sort of right of center media outlets. But as far as mainstream media, and not just news media, but also pop culture, Hollywood, movies, the Grammys, whatever it is, that they're also part of what sets the narrative for how people view one party and how people view the less cool, less popular party, which happens to be mine. and again, it didn't happen with Trump. It was well before Trump. But when after so many presidential campaigns, when you claim that George W. Bush is a racist, and John McCain is a warmonger, and Mitt Romney is a misogynist, and all these guys are jerks, and girls or women or whatever are just bigots. I'm not saying necessarily that Trump is any of those things, but he has a rhetoric that appeals to people like that. And so, fine, you know what? We try to put all these Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and good citizens as candidates to serve their country in office. But if you're going to slander them, then I guess this is the unintended consequence, the negative consequence that comes from crying wolf each time.
Well, I was wondering, is there anything about conservatism that you believe our listeners should know that we haven't discussed?
You asked awesome questions, stuff that I could have gone on and on more, but I wanted to keep things a little together and succinct. But, one thing that I should have answered earlier about why conservatives have a negative reputation or stereotype, the immigration issue is one that frustrates me in terms of how it's covered, and then how just people talk about it in general. That I often hear conservatives are anti-immigration or anti-immigrant or want to make America white again. That is just patently false. Are there extreme, people who have views that are not conservative or are not Republican, but, they are signed up for the Republican Party? Yeah, I'm sure there are, just like there are Antifa communist socialists on the Democrat side. But, in terms of the immigration issue, conservatives are against illegal immigration, just like most people would be against illegal anything. We want to reform a broken system so that it's something more appropriate for this day and age, where we are as a nation. But to just accuse conservatives of being anti-immigrant. I'm the product of immigrants. My husband is as well. Like, this is just something where, we're against illegal XYZ, fill in the blank. We respect rule of law and order. We think that that's what makes the United States an exceptional place, that there is this just natural understanding that there's a respect for law and order, and that should apply to immigration. And this is not to demonize anyone who came illegally. I get it. I think America's awesome, so I would want to be here too. But I just think that there's a reason why it is awesome, because people have respected for a long history of law and order. So if enough people are going to circumvent the system, then that law and order breaks down, then it doesn't become this awesome place that everyone wants to come to. So it's kind of this cycle that needs to be somewhat of a well-oiled machine to sustain itself, to be a place where we can accept people coming from less fortunate places, countries, and also, for that matter, other great countries. Come over here and pursue the American dream. But we just want everyone to be here, and not living in the shadows, and be open and proud and contributing to this robust civic society that provides so much from, we spoke about earlier, the private sector, but also the government provides so much to its citizens who are in need, and then just for all citizens, no matter your race, color, creed, religion. There's a process and an order, and we just want to respect that and reform it when it's needed. So whether that's on the immigration side, criminal justice reform was mentioned at the State of the Union yesterday. So so in summation, immigration is one thing that I wish that non-conservatives would read or watch or listen or talk to someone who is knowledgeable about the sincere conservative approach to and perspectives on what's going on the immigration front, and rather than hearing what the other side, the political opposition side, interprets as what we think. Why don't you just hear it from the source? So I'm grateful for you guys for what you're doing.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You actually, you kind of touched on it a little earlier. You had this, maybe conservatives were sort of, for lack of a better word, stereotyped as the staunch old white guys, but that's not what the party is about. Is that what I'm kind of gathering from you? It's more
yes.
diverse.
It definitely is very diverse, but for those who don't want to see it that way or see it as a threat, for some political opponents who see it as a threat to showcase the Republican Party or conservatives as a diverse group, they're not going to showcase, for instance, the Log Cabin Republicans, which is a group based in D.C. It has regional chapters is the Republican organization for the LGBT community. I have tremendous respect for them. They understand and can see the fact that just because there is one policy issue where on the very traditional GOP platform, it's, people might not be in favor of gay marriage. They understand that is one policy issue among dozens and dozens of other social and fiscal and foreign policy issues that affect a person's life and the society that they live in, that they would rather see progress on that one issue, but really support and embody the other values about the party that resonates with them. So I think that it's a diverse group, the conservatives and Republicans, and if only that were showcased more, then other non-conservative minorities, whether that be on the sexual orientation front or the race or religion front, sees that, they might say, oh, hey, there is another option. Let me see what this is about. Maybe not all conservatives are what I've heard as, the negative stereotypes that we've touched upon throughout the discussion. Hey, I'm curious now, because that is what I guess the political adversaries don't want to happen. They don't want to maybe show that there is another viable option. Maybe so, and for those, for liberals who that is just, not what they believe in and can ascribe to, just general like conservative politics. And they come to this conclusion from a thoughtful, researched, and sincere place. I respect that completely. But I feel like there are a lot, especially in my millennial peer group, who come to this conclusion because Katy Perry told them that Republicans are misogynist.
So can you tell us a little about your book, Bleeding Heart Conservatives, and why it's good to be right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a take on the old Bleeding Heart liberal label, and it outlines social, fiscal, and foreign policy issues and explains conservative opinions from a modest, moderate, and succinct perspective. It proves the point that liberals don't have the exclusive rights on what it means to be a bleeding heart. We also have compassion for others. We also have sincere visions for our fellow citizens, for the world, for our communities, and we just have different paths of getting there. And I wanted to lay it out there, issue by issue. So, and addressing the negative stereotypes, and debunking why that we're not actually all racist, misogynist, bigoted warmongers. I think that this book also speaks to specifically a millennial audience, which is either misunderstood on what conservatism is, or apolitical, because there's just a lot of craziness being spewed in every direction. So this is just from a genuine, everyday, mainstream, right of center person who embodies all these identity politic labels that should not equate to conservative. You know, I'm a woman, a minority, a religious minority, a biracial, cultural minority. So this is, just to debunk all the stereotypes, from my perspective, and that's it from the perspective of all the other representing just the party that I know based on its history, its current makeup, and to provide that from the source. So again, rather than hearing it from a political opponent who wants to interpret what I believe, why not just come to me and ask me what I believe? And I think that by that sort of transparency, hopefully, that will at least get the conversation going. If I haven't persuaded the reader to see the light of the right, at least I will show that our perspectives don't come from a place of hate or anything else negative. So that said, these conservative perspectives, it is my own. I'm not a representative of the RNC. They don't all fall on traditional party lines, but that I think is the beauty also of conservatism or the Republican Party. While most people would view liberals as being open-minded, the open-minded party, it's really actually conservatives in the Republican Party, for better and for worse. There is a very eclectic, diverse set of views within the party. Sometimes we eat our own, but I don't fall on every traditional party line, but net I find myself landing right of center on the various policy issues. But and I own up to that, and I explain why I believe what I believe. This is what the traditional platform is, and I respect that. I respect that we disagree and that we can still debate and have an intelligent, non-demonizing conversation about it.
Well, I hope people take the time from listening to this and be more willing to open up and talk to the conservatives. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can open a dialogue.
That would be amazing. I think that would solve many of the country's problems right now.
Well, Allie, we've just about reached the end of our time. I just want to say thank you for sharing your insight on conservatism with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Happy to come on and address any other issues, hold my feet to the fire.
Thank you. Hey listeners, if you like what you hear, you can help us out by funding our efforts and keeping our show ad-free.
You can do that by donating at our Patreon page at patreon.com/civildistance or by following the link on our website and in our show notes.
You can also show support to our guests by purchasing their books and other works.
You can find a list with links on our website under Guest Works. So, Victor, that was Allison Lee Pillinger Choi, right?
Yes. And I think one of the things that I found most compelling about this is that there's a misunderstanding of the view of what conservatism is.
Especially in the media. When we get this stuff from the media, and I think we touched on this in the beginning, it's not really what conservatism is. And liberalism, for that matter, too. I think they're both very skewed in the way they're portrayed in the media.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting a lot more commentary on the opposing view than you are actually getting a substance of a story or a discussion of a topic anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the things she said was that she felt that, and I'm paraphrasing, that pop culture, not just the media, are shaping the views of the parties.
Yeah.
So, movies, entertainment, and stars, and people are listening to them or seeing this portrayal in entertainment, and that's skewing the view of what conservatives are.
I'll agree with that. Yeah.
And which is interesting because I was just sitting here thinking, well, if you have this sort of this social media society and all this pop culture influence coming in, then basically we're just creating characters of things. And, she actually said, she mentioned the point that like the Boy Scouts and the type of politician are getting bombarded. And if they're being drowned out, then what we're ending up with are the polarizing figures who are more entertaining.
They do get the ratings.
Yeah. But that's not really what the core principles are about.
No.
And that's drowning them out. She kept using the phrase equality for all and favoritism to none.
And yeah, when you see the quote unquote characters that are portrayed in media, via the news or pop culture, you don't hear that, and you're not seeing that person who has a conservative ideal really giving off that notion.
No. I think what you're actually getting is maybe more of a magnetism to their character and not to the subject matter.
Yeah.
And to the principles.
Yeah.
And so, I found that phrase very inspiring in a lot of ways, because I think it's a throwback to, the founding father principles of here's a level playing field. Now, obviously, when you look at the Constitution as it applies today, here's a level playing field. And that's what it is. It's supposed to be the playing field. We all get our chance on it. And with that in mind, it's more about, they have more faith, according to Allie, they had more faith in the
individual spirit.
Yeah. That you can fulfill your own choices, your own destiny. You don't need the government to be involved in that. You just have to work hard. And, that's important. I think they believe in supporting that aspect of the Constitution as self-fulfillment.
Yeah. That was discussed a little bit with Dr. Alterman and liberalism. I think one of the differences there is in the liberal mindset, the government needs to play a part in ensuring an equal playing field. And I wonder, she may have touched on this, and you can help me out, but do conservatives kind of feel that way as well?
I believe that what they feel is that there can be a small safety net of government involvement, but it really should be regulated to different aspects. So they would prefer to have the minimal amount of involvement from the government as possible, from the federal government as possible. But there is a room for a safety net that, the liberals would champion, but not in the extent that liberals want involved.
Or that the way that we are being told that the liberals want it to be involved.
Yeah. And this is very important, is that once again, we have these skewed perspectives, and I think we need to figure out a way to address that.
Yeah, maybe instead of getting our definitions and our understanding of what a liberal and a conservative is via the media or pop culture icons, we should read a little bit more, do a little bit more research, maybe listen to learned people who feel this way and who possess these ideologies and are able to explain it to us in a way that we can understand.
Yeah, one of the things I think is fascinating, she and I have been emailing back and forth since our interview, and one of the articles that she had sent to me was, it was interesting because it was talking about how we kind of get blasted with these, I guess, media labels. And so in the mindset of all liberals now, I mean, that's a gross generalization, but in liberals now, you have this idea of the Republican Party, the conservatives, as all Nazis, because there are these, for a good word, I guess, would be fringe people in the parties. And then both parties have these fringes. But that's what's being brought to light. And so you see these fringe aspects and you say, well, that's the party.
Yeah. And it's the extreme left or the extreme right, and certain media outlets, certain media personalities will jump on that.
And it's the loudest, craziest person is the one you always listen to, is the one you always hear. And that sells. So we sell it.
Yeah. It's sad to me.
Yeah, it is. But I think what happens is that, if you get accused of that, then you're more likely to be standoffish about it. And I think that's on both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone said, hey, you're a communist because you're a liberal, or you're a Nazi because you're a conservative, that's not going to be a great way to open a dialogue or be friends.
No. We both talk to a lot of different people from different walks of life and different ideologies. And, when I talk to a liberal or a conservative, they're saying a lot of the same things. It's just how to go about it, I think, is the difference.
Yeah. I mean, even Dr. Alterman said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, that if there was an alternative to a solution that did involve government, they were open to that. And that's what conservatives want. I mean, there's a similarity there, I think, that should be encouraged. So I got to wonder, what is the solution? So what can we do to help fix these kinds of breakdowns in our political parties?
It's more into the difference of the ideologies. So talking, having meaningful conversations, and just like she said, not about politics, but anything. If you just sit down with somebody is a conservative, or somebody is a liberal that has a different ideology than you, have that discussion. Just talk without blaming or getting nasty.
Yeah, just try to find something to connect on, many of my friends were from all over the political spectrum, the ideological spectrum, and all kinds of differences. And we've always found, not to say that there hasn't been arguments, but always found that it's important to connect and talk. And we've broken through and we've convinced each other in ways, because we're friends, And I think that's what established it first. We found the things that we were similar with, and then there were the things that were differences, and we talked. And sometimes we change each other, sometimes we don't, but we're at least willing to sit down and discuss it.
Yeah. So, listeners, if you had any positive experiences talking to somebody of a different political ideology than you, hit us up. Let us know about it. You can do that on social media, our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or shoot us an email, info@civildissonance.com. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd like to give a special thanks to Stu Art and Design for our show's logos, and to Kiko's Last Smile for the music you've heard during the show.
We would also like to thank our guests for their time and insight, and a thank you to our listeners. Without you, this isn't possible.
Show your support by donating at our Patreon page at patreon.com/civildissonance, and head over to our website for a full listing of our episodes, transcripts, and more information about our guests and other supporters.
Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and other social media. Links are in the show notes and on our website.
And if you're so inclined, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you like what you've heard, tell people about us. I'm Christopher Nottingham.
And I'm Victor Polino. And you've been listening to Civil Dissonance, a Pro Thoughts production.
Now go out and start a conversation.
It's pretty good.
I like it.